Hello and welcome to this two-part review where I'm going to be covering the titans of the cheap bourbon world. Both are screw tops, both are 40% and both sell extremely well, at least here in the UK. This is JD v JB. It's also important to mention that you have to be careful that you don't spill Jack Daniels on your table when you're doing this. It's not that it'll harm the varnish, it'll just make your table smell really bad. So for anyone that's confused about the fact that Jack Daniels markets itself as a Tennessee whiskey rather than a bourbon, you probably shouldn't be. It's not really worth worrying about. Tennessee whiskey it's been pushed for a long time by Jack Daniels as an alternative name for the product that they make, and in my opinion it's mainly just to differentiate themselves from other distilleries. It is actually enshrined in law now. There is a legal definition for Tennessee whiskey and how it needs to be made. It's essentially the same as bourbon, to the extent that Jack Daniels could probably legally be sold as a bourbon. They just choose to differentiate themselves from the rest. As I said before, 40%, so probably shouldn't expect too much. I do actually think that Jack Daniels, being the product that it is, does seem a little bit expensive to me. I can't remember off the top of my head how expensive this one was, but especially compared to the Jim Beam and other similar products, if it's not on offer, it does seem a little bit pricey, at least where I am. Anybody actually surprised that I don't particularly like this? Let's start with the nose. Something that I've probably said when I've reviewed other bourbons, and it's something that I get a lot with American whiskey, is a strong note of peanut brittle and popcorn, and a sweet caramel syrupy note. Also getting quite a lot of vanilla, but more worrying than any of that, I'm actually getting quite a strong acetone, chemically harsh ethanol, very spirity aroma to the nose. A little bit of mint, which is actually quite a nice little accent, nice little touch on the nose. But also on the nose I'm getting a lot of dry, very dry, bitter, astringent, tannic, oaky notes. And I think that combination, sort of a very run-of-the-mill, not standing out in any way, very simple sweetness with the harsh, spirity, acetone, ethanol note and that very dry, not particularly pleasant oak. It's really not a good combination. Let's move on to the palate. I will point out that Jack Daniels here in the UK is bottled at 40%. I believe that's the same all over the world, but if where you are it's bottled at a higher strength, let me know in the comments. So again, lots of nuttiness on the palate, caramel, corn syrup, vanilla. Has to be said that it's quite watery. The mouthfeel is not great and it is just underpowered. But what really isn't helped by how underpowered it is what you have got on the palate still, which I saw on the nose, is that particularly dry, sour, tannic woodiness, kind of like like chewing the end of a pencil, tannic oakiness. And I think if the ABV was higher, that would probably be balanced out a bit. But I think what you're getting here, which you get with quite a lot of whiskies to be fair, when they are watered down below a point which is acceptable, quite often what is left tends to be a bitterness. And something that I mentioned in my review of Ballantine's blended scotch, which is a blended scotch that I do recommend. But I think when you add ice to Ballantine's blended scotch, one of the things that is left over is that bitterness. And I think that's what's happening here. And I would almost certainly say that that's the fault of the 40% ABV. But that is all that's available. So that's what we have. Also getting some quite strange and not particularly pleasant notes of almost glue, sort of like a fishy sort of paste glue, the sort of thing that children might use to work on art projects and stick things into scrapbooks, that kind of glue. And again, I don't know if that's something that's really coming out because of the low bottling strength, but it's really not a good thing. As for the finish, it's pretty short, again down to the low ABV, does not work with this spirit. And it's actually a not too bad mix of sort of sweet and woody oaky notes. So what do I think of this Jack Daniel's Old No. 7? Well, the whole experience is really dominated by this sort of nondescript sweetness and some rather harsh, dry, tannic, bitter, oaky notes, and it's all topped off with some pretty rough spiritiness. So it's not great. I can see why a lot of people would buy this, especially if they're using it as a mixer, because that sweetness and the bitterness would disappear and the sweetness would really accentuate anything like Coca-Cola or probably any mixed drink that you put this in. It's probably going to work reasonably well. But to drink this on its own with no ice, I would expect probably not many people do that because it's not too much of a fun experience. It is easy drinking in a way, but it's not what I would choose to drink. As for a grade, I'm going to give this a C-, and I'm probably being a little bit generous there, mainly because I think most people probably buy this to dump it into mixes. If I was going to ignore that and mark it purely on the grounds of being a whiskey, I would probably not mention a grade here on YouTube. So let's put this aside, and I'll actually call an end to this video here, and you can join me in the second part of this video where I'm going to be trying Jim Beam White Label and comparing the two.